Hi, everyone. So glad you're here with us today. Thank you for joining the podcast. And a special thank you to our guest today because, while I think many topics in the business of mental health are mission critical, this one, I think, right now in particular, holds great relevance because guess what? If we can't get our phone to ring, if we can't get people to contact us, if people can't find us, we are sunk. And we're going to sink into that conversation today. Today we have Omar Ruiz as a featured expert on WebMD, women's health, Newsweek, and more. Omar Ruiz is a Puerto Rican-born, Boston-raised, licensed marriage and family therapist. He's run a successful solo private practice, Talk, Think, Thrive, I love the name, for over 11 years, transitioning from insurance-based care to a private pay model where he specializes in helping couples heal from infidelity. Beyond his clinical work, Omar is now the founder of Private Practice Marketing and creator of the Client Attraction System, an affordable course and coaching program that empowers therapists to market their private practices ethically and effectively, making the process feel less salesy and more authentic, which we all want. Drawing from both his clinical and entrepreneurial experience, Omar is also a seasoned speaker and podcast guest. So glad you're joining us. He's returning for his third year at Mental Health Marketing Conference, has been a featured presenter at the Small Business Expo, and is known for offering concrete, actionable advice to therapists in private practice on podcasts such as The Practice of Therapy, Private Practice Elevation, The Therapist Collective, and now your mental health business mentor, and more. Thank you so very much for joining us, Omar. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Same here. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
You bet. Boy, that's a great bio. I mean, you clearly took what you figured out how to do in your own practice and figured out a way to help other people utilize that wisdom and that knowledge. The reason I said this is particularly useful right now, and I would imagine you're hearing this from folks as well, during the pandemic, it really felt like, and folks who've listened to the podcast, you've heard me say this before, but clients were just sort of falling out of the trees, onto our couches, into our chairs. We didn't have to do much work. This climate looks much more similar to me to what I was familiar with prior to the pandemic, which was there was an element of a go-get. They're not just going to come to us. We have to figure out how to let them know that we're here. So I'm very delighted we're going to have this conversation today because I'm hearing from a number of practice owners who are really concerned about making sure that they can keep their staff busy and themselves. So let's start with just this idea of marketing yourself. Therapists marketing themselves. As we know, everybody I talk to has an opinion about this. Some are fine with it, many are not. Let's talk about that. Why do you think this is so overwhelming for so many people?
Well, what I would say is most therapists weren't trained in business or marketing, especially during grad school. So what we were trained was how to help clients and not how to promote ourselves. So when it comes time to actually what some people will consider to sell their services, it feels uncomfortable, even to the extent of feeling it's unethical to sell yourself. And on top of that, the internet in itself is filled with so many different advice, and some are very broad to very specific, but not specific to mental health. And so I would say the overwhelm comes from not knowing which steps to actually take that would move the needle from a client who's searching to an actual book session. So when therapists see marketing as, well, I would want for therapists to see marketing as building visibility and trust rather than selling or the process, rather than selling, so that the process feels much less intimidating.
Right. So it's the right mindset, right? Which is nobody will find you if you don't tell them you're there. And so we're helping people find us. We're helping people understand what we do. And there's nothing unethical about that as long as we're not promising outcomes, promising results that we can't deliver. We need to let people know that we're there. So you talked about moving the needle forward. Let's just dive right into that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered the systems that you use and how you start to move the needle forward.
Yeah. So, as mentioned when you were sharing my bio, I have been in private practice now going on 11 years. At first, it was insurance based, and that was prior to a lot of these big companies such as Headway, Omar, Grow, and Rula, and so forth, where I had to apply to the individual insurance panels just to be able to see clients there. Was there for about 4.5 years. And then I ended up closing down my practice simply because of two main things. So, to give a timeline, started the practice in 2014, closed it down late August of 2018. But that was due to the fact that the place that I was renting space from, they were increasing rent. So then I had to move to a different place that was much more affordable. And I didn't realize how much location mattered because telehealth existed, but it wasn't a big push. So location mattered simply because I was in the heart of Boston. So specifically for those who are familiar, I was in Dorchester, that was right next to a train station. I then decided to go elsewhere to an office that was a 7-minute drive from my actual house. But as soon as I moved, it turned into almost like a 40-minute commute for potential clients. And so, of course, clients weren't going to be willing to take that commute. And understandably, so I tried to convince them to do telehealth, but they preferred to do it in person. I think the telehealth, even though it existed, was still taboo to some folks. And so, because of that, I lost 95% of my clients. And when I went to this new location, my referrals, which I mostly got from either direct insurance calls or Psychology Today. I did have a website. I shut it down because most of my referrals came from Psychology Today. And so the issue was that I was, I went from maybe 5 to 6 outreaches per week as a solo practitioner down to one per week. And so it wasn't sustainable. And from there, I had to have a conversation with my wife at the time about maybe potentially having to close down the practice and go back to working full time because we were underwater with the mortgage. And so I ended up having to close it down. Plus, the second reason was the insurances in Massachusetts had changed their contracts. And so part of it was specifically I was accepting Medicaid in Massachusetts called Mass Health.
Hmm.
And so what happened is under Mass Health, they had 4 different behavioral health plans. I accepted 3 out of the 4. The majority of clients who had Mass Health, let's just say for the sake of time, they had Plan A. I did not have Plan D. The contract shifted where everybody who had Plan A now has Plan D. So then that ruined a lot of it because yes, I could have applied to get onto Plan D, but that would have taken some more time because of just the approval process of being able to get credentialed. So the decision was to cut it down. And then lastly, I had owed up to $24,000 in back business taxes because no one taught me about the financial side. So it felt like every year I was paying off last year's taxes, but I was missing this year's taxes. And
Hmm.
so I took the year off, was able to catch up with all my back payments, and then decided to reopen as private pay. That's when I realized private pay versus an insurance-based practice is a very different beast of a business model because you can no longer rely on the safety net of insurance to help you market the service. And on directories like Psychology Today, clients can filter the results based on insurance. And if you don't list insurance, you don't get shown. And so what that told me was, okay, I really have to learn how to do marketing. And we're talking about I restarted the business September to October of 2019, a couple months before COVID.
Wow.
Yeah. And
What a
so
year.
and so then at that time I decided it was a lot of like the traditional ideas of marketing, passing out business cards, flyers, going to networking events. But at the time, I was working full time at a school. So I only had but so much time to do a lot of that front facing sort of networking. And what I decided to do was, you know what, let me save money to actually build a decent website. And by March of 2020, that is when COVID really happened and kicked in and everybody was in quarantine. So everything I did traditionally went out the window. My business cards were collecting dust. Any flyers I had didn't matter. All the new networking events got canceled. So that's when I started to venture out into just Googling and go to YouTube. And that's when I would call it YouTube University. I would search up how do you market a private practice or how do you obtain private pay clients? And at that time, there was maybe a handful of business coaches for therapists that were available. The issue that I found with a lot of those videos was I had already built a practice before. So a lot of what they were sharing, I didn't necessarily feel like it was helpful. But I understood the process and I understood what they were doing, which is they were trying to educate the community and also support the idea of having them come into their sort of like business coaching program or private practice building program. So what I decided to do was I took a pivot and I just said, how do you build an online business? Because at that point, everything was online. And that's when I got introduced to search engine optimization, such as SEO, Google Ads, Google Business, email marketing, social media marketing, and then basically the whole gamut. And I spent a lot of time trying to study and understand how psychology today worked. And then from there, it took me about, I would say, 2 years post starting to actually have a full-time practice. And that took me a lot of trial and error, hesitation about investing in marketing, which is something I might share later on today, which is I would consider it like a money mindset issue, which is the idea of being able to understand what is your level of tolerance, if you're risk averse or risk tolerant, to actually invest in marketing. It took me a year studying SEO. And then it's after that, I finally pulled the trigger to actually hire a company to help me because by that time, I couldn't continue trying to implement these tactics because I wanted to focus more on the clinical side. And then I finally paid an SEO team. And by that time, they had already seen all the work I did. So what they were doing was just tweaking some of the things I was doing. And from there, my results came quicker because I had spent so much time trying to figure it out. And from there, I just kept on watching videos. And finally, that landed me to discover Facebook groups for private practice. Didn't realize those ever existed. And when I started joining them, I thought the platforms were to share with other practitioners advice. So that's what I started doing. I noticed that people were asking questions. I figured, well, I've been in this business for, I think at that time, at least 8 years. So I'm talking about 3 years ago. I started sharing and then people were asking me, oh, do you coach? Do you do this? Because you're giving wonderful advice. So I said, no, I don't coach. I'm just sharing because I thought that was what the platform was for. And then slowly but surely, I realized that I was sharing things that not a lot of people were exposed to. I assumed because everybody has access to Google and YouTube that they would do the same thing, not realizing a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people have a bit of a learning curve when it comes to technology. And so from there, I just kept on going and I transitioned to being a business coach and then for therapists. And I realized more of my passion is around marketing. So then I even niched down myself to just focus on the marketing aspect. So I don't teach people how to start the business. I don't go into how to expand into group practice. I just focus on helping those understand how do you actually market your service to actually attract clients because I think that's the difficulty. And I've seen, I would say in the past 3 to 4 years, I've seen almost like thousands of Psychology Today profiles. And I can tell you exactly everything that everybody needs to start changing because it's a constant theme with almost like new therapists, even seasoned therapists, when it comes to what their ideas are around marketing.
Mm. Oh my gosh. There's so much incredible content in what you just said. I mean, you talked about from location of your office, having to move, the cost that goes into that, being accessible to clients in terms of, them not having to drive too far. You talked about essentially people want to be seen where they want to be seen. There are a lot of people who have virtual businesses and they're struggling because right now people are asking for in person and maybe they decided they have a virtual business, so they don't know how to market. That it took a couple of years, that there is a trajectory to really fill your practice potentially, hopefully not that long. A money mindset, SEO. I mean, there's so much in that at the moment. How to optimize psychology today. So obviously, this is something that you do. And folks, if you would like to work with Omar, we'll have all of this information in the show notes. But if you were to give people just a couple of quick tips about their Psychology Today profile, what do people get right and what do they get wrong?
Okay. So I'm going to do quick fire. Number one, they treat Psychology Today as though it's a resume. It's not a resume. It's not about you putting in all your credentials, your license, your degree, the trainings you took, the certificates you have, or even your theoretical frameworks. Most everyday clients can care less about that. They already
Nope.
assume that by the time that they're searching on a platform, you are a licensed therapist or practitioner who has been verified by Psychology Today. So you don't want to waste the real estate on Psychology Today, re-emphasizing those things. That's the first thing. The second is, as common as you might believe, is the profile picture. The ones that you want to avoid, which I've seen across the whole board, is a selfie, a full body shot, simply because most people are looking through Psychology Today on their phones and they can't really grasp your facial features. A black and white photo, simply because the background of Psychology Today is white. So when you have a black and white photo, it's more washed out. A group style photo, this is more so for group practices because Psychology Today is made for individual practitioner's profile. So if you're a group practice, you have to highlight your practitioners, not the group itself. Clients want to feel connected to the actual individual that they're going to work with. They're not working with your whole team. Pictures of you and your kids. If you want to try to target those who are having issues with parenting, new mothers, or just families, you can emphasize that in your copy, not necessarily the photo. Pictures of you and your pet, unless your pet is an actual therapy animal or assistant, then there's no reason to do that because people are going to choose your animal versus you because they're going to say, oh, I chose you because your dog is cute, rather than focusing on your skill set. And most importantly, not a picture of you cropped out as though you're standing next to an ex-boyfriend. That is completely like, I get that could be a great shot, but it's very clear. It almost looks like a Facebook photo. Next, an intro video. I understand the issue of people not feeling comfortable being recorded, but you have to understand if a picture can speak to 1,000 words, what do you imagine the video can do? And it's only 15 to 19 seconds. You don't regurgitate exactly what you shared on the profile. You just simply say who you are, who you help, how you help, and encourage them to book a session. And the how you help has nothing to do with the theoretical framework. Your everyday client, unless they've been exposed to EMDR, CBT, and DBT, they have no idea what any of those mean. So when I say who you help, what is the population that you're helping? And how do you help? Do you repair trust? Do you offer help around developing coping skills when it comes to anxiety? We're not talking about theoretical frameworks. We're talking about logistically just how do you explain yourself to a fifth grader? And a fifth grader is not going to know what EMDR is. Next is very underutilized features is the endorsement section. I tell folks the endorsement section is almost like a professional recommendation. And you can only get endorsements from those who have an active profile. But the issue with the endorsement is that most people, they take it as though like it's a recommendation to go to a college. They say, oh, this is a great clinician. They do well. I know them. That means nothing to an everyday client. They want to know if this professional is recommending you, what are they recommending you for? Are you an expert at helping those dealing with infidelity? If so, that endorser has to mention that. They have to mention what you're good at and what you treat, not just that you're a great clinician. Additional photos is helpful. If you're telehealth only, you can just take a photo of you in front of a laptop. So that way the client has a clear idea of what telehealth actually looks like. Do not post up flyers with any additional photos. I get people try to market groups, but there's a group section that you can actually add to market any groups that you're facilitating. I did see this once. We don't know why this person did this, but you don't have to upload additional photos of you and your spouse. It's not necessary. I don't know if they were trying to inform the market that they also work with a certain population, but that's not necessary. And then finally, when it comes to the paragraphs, it's relatively simple. The first paragraph is all about the client and offering them hope. It should not be about you. How would you know if it's about you if you're using the pronoun of I? If you're saying, I help this. The first paragraph is to grab the attention of the client, to have an idea that you know what their pain points or their presenting issues are. The second paragraph is when you can then speak about how you help, but again, avoid theoretical frameworks and just speak everyday language. I specialize in helping couples dealing with infidelity. How do I help? I've repaired trust. I help develop effective communication, and I rebuild broken intimacy due to betrayal. That is everyday language. I do not mention that my theoretical framework is narrative therapy or my training in family systems. I don't mention any of that. And then finally, the last paragraph is a call to action. People assume that they still have to convince the person to book a session with them. But that last paragraph just simply has to say, if and when you're ready, submit your request here on Psychology Today or visit my website to learn more, and then give some logistics. Technically, there are certain aspects on Psychology Today where it showcases your insurance and your fees, but most people are skimming nowadays. So you want to include it in the third paragraph. So if you charge private pay, put the amount there. And so I have a stance where even when people are looking for therapists, they still want transparency. So if you don't share your fees, people will do their research. And then instead of guessing, they're just going to go to the next person. So I would say that's my quick fire with Psychology Today.
My gosh, folks, most of you who are listening, that was a master class in 4 minutes or 3 minutes of how to really maximize and utilize Psychology Today. And Omar, I'm sure you're hearing this too. I've heard people say, boy, it doesn't feel like Psychology Today is as robust as it used to be. I'm not getting the return on investment. But to your point, is their profile worth it? There are just so many people on there. And is their profile worth it? How do they get, is there a way? I mean, there's a lot of great information in there. Is there a way to get their profile off of page 6 and closer to page 1?
Yep. So with some of my testing, and what's interesting, I'll speak about this in a little bit. I'll just give a quick synopsis. I've actually connected with a SaaS developer who has now created an AI tool that would help folks rewrite their Psychology Today profiles using my marketing tactics. And it's called Therapy Profile Pro, but I'll speak to that in a second because what I'm about to share is also implemented within the tool. When people think about a directory, I think they compare it to Google. They compare it in a sense of the idea of SEO or search engine optimization. Psychology Today is a directory. It's not a search engine. So the way a directory works is that it's based on how a person filters the results that will then narrow down how many providers there are. So the first thing that has to be considered is your location. Psychology Today allows for 3 locations, technically 4, and I'll explain like how you can get a 4th location. And this is just a basic profile. I can go into the weeds of things like multi-state license, folks, but just for the basic, if you're licensed in one state or you want to focus on one state, you go to your listing and you're going to enter in 3 zip codes. How you get a 4th one is that you will add an address on the back of the dashboard, but you hide the address. So you technically, unlike other platforms, you don't actually have to have a real world address that you can add there. You can literally just choose a UPS address and hide it. Mail is not going to be sent there. There's no issue around that. It just helps with getting your profile to have more expansion and reach within the directory. The second part to location is when people talk about competitive and saturated markets, I've done some research and I found out that, and I'm continuous doing research because this is going to be a bigger task that I'm going to be doing. I'm trying to go state by state and then city by city to see how many pages do exist for each city. And what I've come to conclusion is if it's a big metropolitan area, unless you have an office there, then you should not market yourself or put a profile in that location because it's too saturated. The only people that can benefit is if you have a very, very specific niche. For example, for me, for infidelity, I'll choose Boston as one of my locations, even though technically I live in Boston, but I see people at an office 20 minutes outside of Boston in a town called Wellesley. So I put Boston, and if I filter the results in Boston for infidelity, I at least show up within page 1 or 2. One, that's because I have tailored my personal statement to just infidelity. And 2, I've selected it as a top 3 specialty. So when it comes to location, what you need to do is you need to look for areas that have a decent or high population to provider ratio. So meaning Normally, I try to look for anything that has about 20,000 plus of a population density. And I need to look for cities or locations that have less than 4 pages, because then at least that lets me know I have an opportunity to get shown. Now, what people assume is the algorithm, which is like, how do you get shown from page 7 to 1? When you enter in the location, that's the first step of any client. Psychology Today on the help section in the back end, if you just go to the dashboard, you click on your face and then click on help. If you type up SEO or search results, it will actually have a little article that says that Psychology Today shuffles the results every time so that everybody has an ability to show up on the first page. And so that's the first thing. So that just tells me this is not an SEO thing. This has more to do with how they shuffle to give everybody equal opportunity. Second, people don't realize that Psychology Today highlights certain words depending on what people select. So when you select infidelity within the filtering option, look at the results page and you'll see some profiles have highlights. The highlight represents that the person actually wrote down the specialty word for word within their personal statement. The other part is what I call an italicized snippet. So if you ever looked within the search results and some people have extra text above the four lines, that's because they included their specialty within the second or third paragraph. And how you can determine how much text will be shown literally will be based on if you added a period. So if you created a wrong sentence, which I see a lot of people do what I call listicles, I treat anxiety, comma, depression, comma. If you do that, then yes, the italicized snippet will be huge because you did not add a period. However, what you need to focus on is your specialty. Number 3 is the common specialties as almost every single therapist selects is anxiety, depression, and trauma. The issue with those 3 is they're selected by so many people, they become very competitive terms that people search for. What I tell people is if that's what you want to specialize in, that's fine, but you have to double down on what type of anxiety, what type of depression, and what type of trauma. Because saying that is just too general, because that doesn't make you different from everybody else. If you guys went to the same school, got the same training, got the same license, same certificate, then what makes you different than the next person? Because at that point, what we're looking at is what population do you want to serve? So to get from page 7 to 1, you consider number 1, location. Number 2, which specialties do you want to get found for? Number 3, are they actually written word for word in your first, second, or third paragraph? And lastly, it goes back to the endorsements. The endorsements help because if, let's just say, I specialize in infidelity, I want my endorsers to include infidelity. Because what happens is, once a profile is shown as a highlight, when you actually click and read the person's profile and you scroll down to the endorsements, if they included infidelity in the endorsements, that will get highlighted in blue. And so to me, what that means is that they do that deliberately to stand out because the background of Psychology Today's website is white. So if it's highlighted, that showcases expertise, which
Mm.
improves visibility, that improves people to actually want to learn more about you. Does that answer your question?
Does. Oh my gosh, Omar, this is incredible information because we've only talked so far really about Psychology Today, and I'm glad we're doing that, in part because just about everybody feels okay about Psychology Today. They don't necessarily have the budget for Google Ads. I mean, it's, a different name now, but they don't necessarily have the wherewithal, the knowledge to know how to go about, or the time to go about marketing in a different way. So just even maximizing your Psych Today profile sounds like it can make a big difference. So if you had to pick just the other next best thing for people to do, in addition to Psychology Today, if they already feel like, okay, so I have a Psychology Today profile, maybe I'll tweak it some, but they also happen to be in a bit of a saturated area, or maybe not. But what else? What is like the number 2 thing you would suggest that people do?
If they have an in-person office, even if it's part-time, the second thing, which is free, is Google Business Profile. I'd say for in-person, because technically anybody who has a telehealth practice can create a Google Business Profile. Within the setup, they would have to select, instead of storefront, they would select service area. Storefront just simply means that you have a brick and mortar address that clients can actually see you. Service area technically is designed for contractors that visits their customers' homes, like plumbers, electricians, and so forth. So technically, a Google Business Profile was never really designed for an online business. Google will put more emphasis on you want to get found within the search results, not within the map section. So a Google Business Profile allows your practice to get shown within Google Maps. So if you do a random search of, let's just say, couples therapy near me, the three results that show is Google Ads, the Google Maps, and the organic search results. Within Google Maps, the first three businesses tend to get 33% of the clicks. So that's the reason why I look for Google Business, simply because it helps your practice get visibility on Google. And this is like a step before you even invest into a website. The issue when you do a service area business is that Google will first prioritize business profiles that have a physical address first. Then they'll show the service area businesses. Because again, the map section is literally what's close and what's on the map. If you're online, you don't really have a storefront business. You're just in the ether. So I would say Google Business. With a Google Business, you have to fill out everything. 2, add pictures, and maybe if you want to, you can even add the same intro video that you add for Psychology Today there. 3, it is the most important thing, which is reviews. Now, I did hear a previous podcast episode that you had about reviews. And so I even did a deep dive on online reviews. And in short, I've discovered that not every single mental health provider, based on their code of ethics, follows the same guidelines. So the most strictest guideline is the ACA. Those are professional counselors. They cannot solicit reviews from former and current clients. Social workers and psychologists, their ethical code simply says they cannot solicit reviews from current clients, does not say former. Marriage and family therapists who abide by the AAMFT, there are no explicit code of ethics that restricts them from soliciting testimonials. Those who are marriage and family therapists in California that abide by the CAMFT, they have a section that says they cannot solicit from those who are vulnerable to undue influence, which is a language that is shared across the board, which I found out it's not a clinical language, it's a legal language. So it basically just means that the person needs to have the ability to have free will and free choice. So you cannot ask, for example, a teenager, because they still are dependent on their parents, for example. Substance abuse counselors who abide by the NAADAC or NADAC, they are allowed to solicit reviews based on their code of ethics from former clients. Pastoral or Christian counselors, they cannot solicit reviews from from current clients, but they can from former clients as long as they have the proper signature and paperwork. Those who don't have anything, it also includes prescribing psychiatric providers, such as psychiatric mental health nurses, psychiatrists, and physician's assistants. They have no code of ethics that restricts them. And so what that means is that depending on your license will depend on how you would go about soliciting reviews. And reviews are important from a Google perspective simply because that is one of the factors that a consumer, aka our clients, will look into. We are the ones who have to adhere to both HIPAA, our code of ethics, and everything else and best practices. But for clients, they don't. Clients are still consumers. They're still going to read. And if people decide to ignore reviews, the issue I have with that is still connected to your online reputation. So you might decide, I'm going to ignore it because I don't want to risk anything. This goes back to the risk tolerance of risk averse and risk tolerance, where people are so concerned about HIPAA that they choose not to engage in it, which then limits their ability to actually market and promote their services. And so what I explained to folks is under HIPAA, there's a lot of different policies, but the ones I would focus on is one, when it comes to someone leaving a review, So there's three. There's positive, fake, and negative reviews. Let's go first with a fake review. With a fake review, how you determine it's a fake review? First, you will look at who left you the review, meaning the name of the reviewer. You review that based on your EHR system to see, has this actually been a past client or not? If they're not at all connected to your practice, you never spoke to them, then by HIPAA policies, you do not owe them any HIPAA duties because they were never an existing client. So therefore, you can say that in your review because there's nothing to protect. So you can say, thanks so much for this feedback. Based on our records, we don't see that you were an active client. If you are interested in services, please reach out to us. And then that's it. The whole purpose with Google Business or any review platform, if it's Yelp, Health Grades, is if it's a fake or negative review, you get the person offline. Never address anything online because it's open to the public and you'll be subject to your board and association if you're not adhering to HIPAA and their ethical codes. If it's a negative review, same thing. We appreciate the feedback. Please give us a call or send us an email so we can address the concerns here. Due to our policy, we do not address such concerns in an open forum. If it's a positive review, say similar, which is appreciate the feedback. Here at Tree of Life Counseling, we work to provide the best quality and care service. And then that's it. Reviews matter with Google simply because people don't understand that it's still a competition. You are trying to obtain client referrals. So I joke around and say, I get the idea of this whole kumbaya, let's share referrals. But if you're struggling to get client referrals, then you networking with someone who's also trying to get referrals is not going to be the best strategy. You're not really doing much. And so with reviews, what I suggest is type up the service that you're looking for, look at the map section and average out what the average review score and average amount of reviews received. You compare yourself based on a similar practice. So if you're a solo practice, only compare yourself with solo practice Google Business profiles. If you're a group practice, you compare yourself to group practices. That will give you an idea of how many reviews you're going to need to compete in the market. And if you're still very risk averse about soliciting any sort of reviews from clients based on your code of ethics, you can always start off with getting the professional endorsements. So same people you asked to endorse you on Psychology Today, ask them to also endorse you on Google Business. As long as you get about 10, 10 is a good number to start. So then that way the business profile has an ability to show up on the rankings. So I would say, in short, that would be the best secondary strategy simply because it's free and you have full control of what you do there.
Mm. You know, Omar, you clearly have expertise. You have done your work, you've done the research, you're helping people grow and get found. This is great information. If people wanted to work with you, how can people find you and what can they expect?
Yes. So they can go to marketyourprivatepractice.com. And what I currently offer is a 7-day trial for just $7 for the system. So the system, what people get within that trial is they get access to the course, which is roughly about 5 hours. So I cover Psychology Today, SEO, which also includes Google Business, a overview on Google Ads and overview on social media, and everything I just shared about online reviews. I also included that with additional information, especially covering defamation law. Once you finish the course, you can sign up for a live group coaching session, which it could be maybe for one person to maybe like 10 people that can join. It depends on people's schedule. And so within that group coaching session, literally whatever concerns or issues you're having with marketing, even if you need me to review your profile, I will do it, so forth. And some people enjoy the fact that they can connect with other people within group coaching. After the trial, if folks wanted to stay, when they stay, they become what is called a pro member. A pro member is where they can book a one-on-one strategy session with me where I will do a complete audit of all their marketing and I'll create what their plan needs to be. And so then that way they can use that form. So when they sign up for group coaching on a weekly basis, they would use that form as a guide to ensure what they need to do. Normally people, I would say, if it's a solo practitioner, I don't see them staying with me longer than 3 to 6 months, because by that time they should be able to have what they need. Group practices, I find that they tend to stay longer because let's say they sometimes send their admin staff to attend to the group coaching sessions because some of them have other additional marketing goals. Like one of them currently right now, they're needing help with marketing a in-person workshop around intimacy. And so they're having a hard time trying to get people to sign up for that in-person workshop. And they have like a 67,000 member Facebook group that's just all about relationships. So I'm going in there, looking at their Facebook group, looking at what their content strategy is. And so for group practices, in the beginning, if it's a small one, I tend to hear a lot. They have trouble filling up their clinician's caseload because a lot of people are still looking onto them. So which is why they tend to use certain languages and they do a group photo because they're trying to diverge people to the other clinicians. And then after that, it just continues until the person reaches the point where they need to. So I would consider myself in the program more of an education / coaching training program. So I'm the gap between grad school and the other practice building programs that might expand upon like passive income or coaching or speaking engagements. I'm the part of like, how do you attract the people so that you can build the income so then you can go into those spaces and then expand?
Mm. Folks, please contact Omar Ruiz. As I said, we will have your information all available in the show notes. This is a master class, just an overview today of what you can offer. My gosh, you have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information. Folks, contact Omar if you want to get things moving in your practice, you want to fill up your caseload or the caseload of your clinicians. I've interviewed a lot of people and there's a lot of value here. So Omar Ruiz, thank you so very much for being here with us today, sharing all of this with us. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Always lovely to have you here. Please join us again next time. Be well.